Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone today?
Good.
I'm Captain John Smith. We are here today to decide if I am a hero or a villain. Shall I remain a free man, or shall I be sent to jail? I've been accused by many things in my life. However, I feel people felt threatened by me and thus treated me as if I was a terrible rule-breaking man. I alone am the reason Jamestown survived. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am a hard-working, honest, and law-abiding citizen. At the conclusion of this trial, it is my hope that in the interests of justice, you will find that I am a hero of my time, not a villain. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the defense. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain John Smith was a brave, courageous man. He was an adventurer, soldier, map maker, explorer, and author. He is a man who became a dominant force in the eventual success of Jamestown and the establishment of its legacy as the first permanent English settlement in North America. In order to better understand the amazing Captain John Smith, we must look back at his story. John Smith was born in England in 1580. As a young boy, he attended local grammar schools, learning reading, writing, arithmetic, and Latin. Not wanting to be a farmer, John ran away at age 13 to become a sailor. But his father didn't want him to be a sailor, so he stopped him, and instead he made John work as an apprentice to a nearby merchant. When John was 16, his father died and he went to France to join English soldiers fighting the Spanish. When the fighting ended, John returned to England a trained soldier. John Smith spent time alone living in a shelter he built of tree branches. John learned how to live off the land, and he read books about the rules of war and politics. He also worked to improve his horsemanship and jousting skills. These lessons prepared Smith for his next adventure. In 1600, when Smith was only 20, he set off to join the army. On his way, Smith experienced several adventures, including serving on a pirate ship in the Mediterranean Sea. His pirate service, are you ready for this? Earned him 500 gold pieces. Good stuff. Smith fought battles in several countries, earning him several awards for his bravery in battle. One award was his promotion to captain, a title Smith remained proud of the rest of his life. Smith had become a very accomplished soldier and leader, but his good fortune ended in 1602 when he was wounded and captured in a battle and sold into Turkish slavery. Smith was then forced to march 600 miles. Let me read that again. Smith was then forced to march 600 miles, where he was given as a gift to people in Russia. He was given little to eat and was mistreated. Smith fled his enslavement on a stolen horse.
Objection! Mrs. Kleist is not telling you the whole story. Ladies and gentlemen, what she failed to mention was that he first killed his master, then stole his horse.
With all due respect, Mrs. Cerniglia, if you were severely mistreated and nearly starved to death, perhaps even you may have found it reasonable to escape at any cost.
No.
Let me continue. After escaping, he met friends along the way. He regained his strength, traveled through many countries, and returned home to England in 1604. One author estimates Smith's travels from 1600 to 1604 covered nearly 11,000 miles. The captain was finally home, but not for long. Smith's military experiences impressed important men in England, especially Captain Bartholomew Gosnold, a man who wanted to establish an English colony in the Chesapeake region of Virginia. Gosnold and other important men in London organized the Virginia Company of London and were granted a charter by King James I on April 10, 1606 to establish a colony in Virginia. In December 1606, the company dispatched 3 ships carrying 104 settlers, including Captain John Smith, to start this colony. Established on May 13, 1607, the colony was named Jamestown in honor of the king. Many historians credit Jamestown's survival to the efforts of Captain Smith. Why, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. Originally, the colony was governed by a council of 7 men, and Captain Smith had been named by the Virginia Company to serve on this council. The problem was, he was wrongly arrested for mutiny. This means he refused to obey the orders of a person in authority along the voyage to Virginia.
Objection! Mrs. Kleist is once again not telling you the whole story. Let me fill in the blanks for you. He was arrested for mutiny because he once again couldn't follow the rules. He narrowly escaped a hanging, and he arrived at Jamestown in shackles as a prisoner.
Oh, Mrs. Cerniglia, details. Fortunately, he was released by the Reverend, a holy man, and was allowed to take his council position. The first months in Jamestown were difficult. Smith conducted, listen to this, expeditions to the Powhatan, how did I do? Powhatan? Why can I never say that the right way? Powhatan villages, securing food for the desperate colonists. In one such expedition in December, he was captured by a large hunting party and led on a long trek to various villages, ultimately being brought before the chief. This meeting resulted in the famous story written by Smith of being saved from death by Pocahontas. The captain was released shortly after the ceremony and escorted back to Jamestown. By this time, only 38 of the 104 settlers were still alive. More settlers arrived at Jamestown in January 1608, and the chief sent some food to the English, but misfortune struck in early January with an accidental burning down of most of the Jamestown fort. The extreme cold that winter, coupled with the loss of shelter and food from the fire, led to the deaths of more than half of the new settlers. Smith tried to focus the colonists on their immediate needs and not spend valuable time searching for gold, but this was such a difficult task. In the spring of 1608, Captain Smith undertook one of the most important European explorations in North America. He went through the Chesapeake Bay and all of its tributaries. From these trips, Smith created a very accurate map. In fact, you can still find it today, and it is really accurate, of the area along the Chesapeake Bay with locations of various Indian villages and other vital information. This exploration and map of the Chesapeake Bay region were some of Captain Smith's greatest accomplishments. In September 1608, Smith was elected president of the colony. The head of the council, he implemented common sense regulations for the colony, such as he that will not work shall not eat. Good job. Under Smith's leadership, the death toll dropped dramatically. The fort was repaired, crops planted, a well dug, trees cut into clapboards, and products such as pitch, tar, and soap ash were produced for shipment back to England. Amazing. Even during times of food shortages, Smith sent colonists to live with the Indians, confident no harm would befall on them, as he believed the chief and his people feared him and their English weapons.
You know, Mrs. Kleist, just let me interject here. I would like to tell you all the rest of the story. Unfortunately, relations were tenuous between the English and the Powhatan Indians. Did I say it right? As Smith's diplomacy often turned violent, taking food and destroying villages. Smith believed all this to be necessary and strategic. However, the natives felt differently. The final meeting of Captain Smith and the chief occurred in January in 1609. It occurred in 1609 at Werowocomoco. The capital, where each leader plotted the other's death.
Did you hear that? I mean, I think she's
That was
making this
major.
up, but could you read that
chief's plan to kill Smith and his colleagues was ruined due to a timely warning given Smith by Pocahontas.
Thank you for all of that, Mrs. Cerniglia.
Wow.
She returned to England after suffering a severe injury from a gunpowder explosion. He missed the first Anglo-Powhatan war between the settlers and the Indians, as well as starving time in the winter of 1609 to 1610. The colony might have suffered less had Smith not been injured. Smith remained interested in Jamestown. Even though he was back in England, he wanted to return, but Virginia Company officials refused his request. Always the adventurer, Smith went on a voyage in 1614, exploring the shores of northern Virginia, when he mapped and renamed New England. He wanted to establish a colony there, but he was captured by French pirates while sailing to New England in 1615. Escaping the pirates, Smith returned to England, where he wrote about his life's adventures. In 1620, this is just a little factoid, the Pilgrims nearly elected Captain Smith to be their military advisor, but instead they selected Miles Standish. However, they did use Smith's map of New England. It was later said about him that while he was often a bit of an exaggerator, nothing John Smith wrote has yet been found to be a lie. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard, Captain John Smith was a brave and strategic soldier, a trained military man, a trusted member of Jamestown, an elected leader, an explorer and adventurer, an expert mapmaker, and a miracle worker with the Native Americans. Clearly, he was the reason Jamestown survived. He should be set free so he may go forward and be celebrated as the hero he is.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to explain why what Mrs. Kleist said is not true and why Captain John Smith should in fact go to jail. Halfway through the voyage to America, somewhere in the Canaries, the Jamestown fleet's leaders took Captain John Smith into custody and accused him of hiding an intended mutiny. Again, meaning that he was refusing to obey the orders of a person in authority. At the next stop across the Atlantic in the Caribbean, they offered to hang him, and they got as far as hammering together the gallows. Before his fellow settlers threw him out of Virginia 32 months later, they would again try to hang him, to banish him, and even to murder him. This is not the Captain John Smith story that we have all heard before. Let me tell you what he was really like. Though it is true that Smith was an explorer, a writer, a mapmaker, a geographer, a soldier, a sailor, a governor, an admiral, and the editor of a seaman's handbook, every story has more than one side. And Mr. Smith is a many-sided man. Many positive writings about Smith were written, in fact, by Smith himself. He was quick to exaggerate his successes and often wrote about how wonderful he was. Just 2 months after the colonists landed in Virginia, and 4 months after Captain Smith was arrested at sea, the government released him from custody. Guess what? He then organized an argument against President Edward Maria Wingfield. He stirred up trouble by telling others that President Wingfield did not own a Bible, and therefore he was not a believer in the Church of England. 6 months later, John Smith was again supposed to hang for his crimes. A last-minute arrival of a supply ship saved him. Even the Native Americans wanted to execute him. A few months after that, Smith ousted yet another president and took over the job for himself. Many thought that he wanted to become a tyrant king. Smith denied the allegation, yet by the end of his reign in Jamestown, he did indeed rule alone, terrorizing Indians, bullying Englishmen, and flogging whoever happened to cross him. He once went so far as to come up with a plan to poison people who spoke out against him. Once again, many settlers wanted to punish John Smith for all that he had done. In the end, the English decided on sending Smith home so that he could answer for, among other things, encouraging the Indians to attack the colonists.
Now, wait a second here, Mrs. Cerniglia. You have completely ignored the fact that he was sent home due to a gunpowder wound.
He was
Now.
sent home because he was in trouble.
And now you're saying he was organizing Indians to attack the colonists? This makes no sense.
You know, Mrs. Clyde, you can go ahead and believe whatever you'd like. I will proceed with my prosecution here, and I would appreciate no further interruption from you. Anyway, they were able to send back not 1 or 2, but 8 or 9 witnesses against his crimes. Many people have written about Smith's exaggerations over the years. In fact, it has been said that many of his memoirs sound more like tall tales than the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, John Smith was not a nice man, nor was he available to help anyone but himself. John Smith was tried several times over, and each time he was sentenced to death. Who are we to overturn the accusations by his peers? Who are we to allow this man to continue on his destructive path? Who are we to aid him in his exaggerations by allowing them to continue? This man must be convicted of all the crimes that he has committed. We must uphold the trials of his past and convict him now.
Yeah! No! Smith, would you like to provide a closing statement?
I would.
Feel free to say anything else you feel necessary.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, after hearing all the testimony and reviewing all of the evidence today, I am positive you see me as a hero and not as a villain. I do not deserve to be sent to jail.
Yay!